Welcome to Saving UX. I'm your host, Jeremy Kriegel. Every episode, I talk to UX veterans about the challenges facing our practice and what we can do to make it better. This is the second half of my conversation with author and entrepreneur Richard Banfield. If you missed part one, go back and listen to that. You can watch it on YouTube and listen on most podcast platforms, or do both at sucks.live. That's SUX for savingux.live. And now, part two of Saving UX with Richard Banfield. We pick up where we left off at the end of episode one.
No, I mean, if you ask anybody who's at Freshfield Soil, our average week was about 32 hours. And we were, at one point, Freshfield Soil had the highest revenue per employee in the industry. It just was, we were just doing better work with the time that we had. And I think everybody's had that experience. If you know you've got to get something done and you've got a limited amount of time, you will do it. You will figure out how to do it, and you will get smarter, and you'll get more thoughtful about what you end up spending time with. But if you're expected to sit in the office staring, and if your boss expects you just to be there, then you must leave that organization, because that's unhealthy. That's unhealthy for you. It's unhealthy for the organization. And we're all adults. We don't. Our bosses are not our parents. We don't have to listen to them. We can make choices. We can move on. This is a great time to be moving around. The fluidity and an opportunity in the industry right now is significant. So let's teach organizations that we're not just factory workers by voting with our feet and saying, I'm sorry, you're not respecting the time. You're not respecting work as an idea. You're not respecting human beings. I'm going to go and work somewhere else. I'm going to work somewhere where that's possible. And I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I get that that's not possible for everybody. But I do know that now is the best time that I've ever seen for the ability to move around and take advantage of that.
One thing I just want to add, because I know you're not going to say it, is not only did you have those shorter work weeks at Freshfield Soil, but you were doing way more than just client work. You did a tremendous amount to give back to the community, running events and sharing knowledge and bringing people together. So, and I imagine a ton of effort must have gone into that. So to have been able to accomplish everything you did, both as a consulting organization for your clients, as well as the contributions you made to the community, it was really fantastic that you were able to do that and still keep a really good work-life balance.
Yeah, and we encouraged our team to participate in book writing. So, as you know, Todd and I wrote the Design Sprint book together with at the time, MC was on, Michael Connors was on that list of contributors. His name's not on the book, but he then went on with Todd to write a book on roadmaps. And I think in total, the team produced about 7 books, ranging from JavaScript to design sprints and product leadership in the last, I'd say it was probably like a book a year, at least, maybe even slightly more than that.
Not bad for a small team.
Yeah, and that's important. And I really, really mean this. Like, and again, I want to disclaim everything with the fact that I understand I'm coming from a place of privilege. Like, I can choose to work where I want to work. I'm not just trying to kind of get through the day and something like my first job or something like that. But we really have to teach our organizations how to behave. If we teach them that we're factory workers and we behave accordingly, then that's going to be the consistency. That's what we're going to see. But if we teach our organizations that we are human beings and we want to do good work and we want to respect each other's time and we want to build strong relationships across these different functional areas, then that's what organizations become. That's what we saw in these big studies that we did, is that the more that people showed up with that respect for time, respect for each other, respect for domain knowledge and expertise, those soft skills translated very directly into hard outcomes. And that's kind of like the overriding thing I'd love the listeners today to take away, is that the hard stuff is the soft stuff, right? It's the getting to know people, building relationships, having respect for other people, having empathy, having compassion, being kind. there isn't such a thing as a work life and a life. You don't just, I've heard people say, oh, it's just work, it's not personal. That's such a dicky thing to say. Like, why would you show up inauthentically at work and treat people like crap and then go home and be nice to your kids? Like, just show up as a good person and treat people with kindness, and you'll be amazed at what doors will open for you and how wonderful work becomes and how wonderful your teammates ultimately show up for you. They show up with more energy, more enthusiasm. They actually produce more, and that makes everybody look good. And if that's the ultimate goal of UX, is to produce a better product, then that's how you get there.
I want to shift gears a little bit. Um, Again, you've had a lot of different experiences. You've been in this space for a long time. What is different now in terms of your beliefs about design compared to maybe a decade or 2 decades ago? How has your approach evolved in maybe in a way that you can share that might help other people who might be where you were back then?
Mm. Um, well, this is all again anecdotal, and it's my personal
Of
experience, so it
course.
could be very different for everybody else. Um, and I think because I came from biology, I saw things as systems, right? I saw big pictures. I saw interacting dynamics between lots of different moving parts. Um, I think for a while, I felt like design could solve a lot of problems and that it should solve a lot of problems. I think where I am now is that I ask those questions: should design be solving those problems? You are these problems worth solving? Is There's a great book called The Innovation Illusion about how much we emphasize progress and so, in terms of just kind of overall civilization, but specifically around tech. Um, and I'm not sure that the things that we've created can necessarily solve all of these problems. So I think I'm still an optimist, but I think where I'm a little bit more thoughtful, maybe even a little bit jaded, is that I don't know if we need to be solving all these problems, and I'm pretty sure that technology can't solve its own problems. Like when I hear somebody's launching another meditation app, I'm like, you can't really solve the problem that people are distracted by technology with another app. Like it doesn't really jive. Um, so I think that we're trying a little too hard. We're trying too hard to be the saviors. We've got this messiah complex where we think we can come in and fix everything. I don't know if it's necessary. I think even as UX people, designers, we can say, maybe this is not a design problem. Maybe this is not exactly what we should be focused on right now. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And I think that's where I've changed. I did believe for a long time that design could solve most of the problems. And I was really excited about that. And actually, the Design Sprint book was an effort to teach people a very simple way to get that process started. That you didn't have to be a designer. You just had to be somebody who was interested in solving problems. And you could pick up the Design Sprint book, and an hour or two later of reading, you'd be like, wow, I've got a framework that I can use that is basically just based in the scientific method. And I can go from hypothesis to testing in a relatively short space of time, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Like, these were a big deal for us because we didn't really have the simplicity of process back then. And so design sprints really helped get us there. The problem was it started to feel like a bit of an elixir.
Mm.
It started to feel like we were selling our own snake oil just for the sake of having everybody taste it and understand it. And the reality is, not everybody needs a design sprint. We definitely over-indexed on bringing designers into a lot of problems that didn't need them. Some, I'll give you a good example. Um, we had a client come in, and they had convinced themselves, but they started convincing us too, that we needed to embark on a big UX UI overhaul of an existing product. Now, the product was doing okay, it wasn't doing great, it had kind of stalled, and their investors were starting to ask questions about, why isn't this making more progress? Why is this thing not growing? And their conclusion was it needs an overhaul. It needs a UI overhaul and it needs a UX overhaul. And we kind of bought into that for a while. For the first kind of like couple of meetings, we were like, yeah, this product isn't that great. through those lenses. But then we started doing customer interviews. We started asking the market what they thought, and almost every customer that was using the product said, "Oh, it's fine. There's no UX problems. I mean, there's like some, you know, normal issues, normal challenges with any product, but they weren't insurmountable, and they certainly weren't preventing them from using the product. What they didn't really understand is what the overall value of the product was. They kind of got a sneaking suspicion of what it was, but they weren't clear. And what we ended up doing was making the product easier to sell by actually making it simpler, by removing some things and making the business model a little
Wow.
cleaner. And we worked with them on the business side of that. We were saying like, well, how do we, and eventually they sold that company and they did really well. They had a pretty good exit. So I think if you, again, I think this is, I'm borrowing this from Maslow. Everything looks like a hammer. Everything looks like a nail if you're a hammer.
Right.
Everything looks like a UX problem if you're a UX person. Everything looks like a design problem if you're a design person. And I think we just need to be careful that we don't try too hard. We might be trying a little too hard to bring design to the conversation. And sometimes it just doesn't need to be there. Sometimes it's actually a business problem or a sales problem or a marketing problem. And that's okay.
Do you have any sense of triggers to look out for? Like, if you're noticing this, then maybe that's not your problem, or maybe you're working too hard, you're trying too hard. Like, things that we could be better aware of to assess that.
Mm. I actually need to publish this, but I've got an article in the works that has exactly those questions. It's part of that decision stack thinking,
Cool.
which is, what are the questions you need to ask in order to get there? And a lot of those questions are just trying to check the assumptions. Like when somebody walks into a room, and this is, what Jared Spool calls the swoop and poop. It's the drive-by, the VP that comes in the room and says, I've got an idea, or I saw our competitors do this, or we should do this. The assumption checking needs to be in place, right? Why? Why do we need to do it? Why are we on the hook to recreate what our competitors have created? What are the origins of this idea? Is there data to back it up? Is there even just some qualitative interviews? One of the things that's been beaten into me by the fact that I worked in an agency and we were shipping like 17 products for our customers every year. But, some people might work on a single product their entire career. And even that, they might even just work on one part of a product. We got to see the whole thing. And what we were able to do is get out of our own heads very quickly. We were definitely talking to customers because we didn't have the context. A customer would come to us or a client would come to us and say, well, this is a product in, like GE would come out and say, this is a product in the sustainable energy market. We didn't know anything. We were working with PhDs that were really, really good at mechanical engineering of wind turbines. We didn't know that. So the only way that we could get up to speed with that conversation was to go out and talk to the towns and cities and municipalities that were buying those products and saying, what is it that you think you're buying? What is the value that's being exchanged here?
Mm.
And in those conversations, we quickly got to understand where we were. So we didn't need the PhD. What we needed is the context. And so that's always been my decision-making path is, can I go to the market and understand what's going on here? And any UX person can do that. So I launched a product when I was at InVision called Learn, which is essentially a learning platform product. It was very neatly in between the assessment and our community that we had was this learning product, the skills product. And the first thing I did was I called every major company's learning, their learning officer or director of learning or education, whether it was IBM or Adobe or VMware. And I asked them, what's going on? What's happening in learning? What's happening in B2B learning? What's happening in your space? And quickly, I started to understand where the opportunities were, where the gotchas were, where the pitfalls might be, because I was learning from all of the experiences. And that way, when I was going into meetings with our executive, I could say, we have spoken to people who know more than we do. They are smarter because they've been doing this for 10 years or 20 years. They have seen what we can't possibly see. They've seen around those corners because of what they've done.
Right.
And from that, we've established these are the patterns, these are the things we should be interested in. Not, I saw something on 60 Minutes last night and we should do that, which is unfortunately the way things get done in corporate businesses. Somebody with authority or influence says they want to see something, and that's kind of how it starts. There's really very little in the should we even do this conversation. So I don't know if that's I'm
No,
not sure that helps you answer the question, but it's,
I,
start with the customer, start with the market, start with the people that are smarter than you. Generally, there are people that have done this better and more frequently than you have anyway. We're not reinventing the wheel very often. These are things that are pretty standard. Mostly there's not a lot of innovation in the world. There's very rarely big breakthroughs.
yeah.
So you can actually learn from other people. You don't have to figure it out all on your own.
I think just having that humility that we might not know all the answers, so let's go talk to some other people, like you said, who know more than we do, who are
So glad you mentioned that word.
as more believable
Yeah.
than we are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that humility is important. I think to go back to an earlier question is what's changed? I think the humility has changed. I think we thought we were better than we were. And now I'm just like, I think we're pretty crap and we should actually go and ask more questions. And I think that's kind of healthy.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know if that just comes with age or experience, and you get older, you realize how much more you don't know. I certainly
Yeah,
did too.
exactly. The more you get to know, the more you realize you don't know anything.
I was a number of years ago. I was with a startup, and we were being pitched by an agency I had worked for in the past, and it was the senior person and a bunch of junior people. And I was at one point I was probably one of those junior people. And at some point, I sat in the room and just kind of had this meta moment of thinking, was I this full of crap when I was that age? Yeah, I probably was. But it was,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, we could do with more humility.
I want to maybe wrap up with one thing you said early on. And a number of the things we've been talking about, fascinating. They also kind of speak to the interconnectedness between UX and other, the partners we collaborate to create great products and services. And maybe want to turn it back to ourselves. You made an offhand comment in the beginning about UX getting in its own way.
Mm.
And I know you mentioned specialization. Is there anything else with that we are getting in our own way that we could stop or do better that would help make us more effective?
Yes. I used to do this thing at the beginning of every year. I would do a search for what UX conferences were coming up that year. And I would look through it because there are sites that's all they do is they just aggregate where the next UX event's going to be. We're in February, so now it's kind of like UXLX time. There was started in Europe, and then you would have this kind of like slow ramp up, just before the summer, and then the summer would kind of slow down a little bit, and then you'd have this massive amount of events in October, November, December. And what I realized is I'm living in a bubble. Like I'm going to UX events to hear UX people talking about UX. And I think that one of the things we have to be careful about isn't just specialization, but who are we listening to? We don't like this when it happens politically, when we're inside some kind of, echo chamber. But it's kind of what we do in our world is that why aren't we going to the events that our product companies, the companies themselves are hosting? Like I was invited to go to an insurance conference. I was like, what the hell do I want to know about the insurance industry? And I went anyway. It was amazing. I was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on here that I had no idea about. This was like pre-Lemonade and pre some of those like big ideas. But they were bubbling up. They were starting to like, these ideas were starting to become conversations at these conferences. And those are where you see these amazing ideas come from. Home Tap's another good example, right? If you went to Vegas and you went to the big like real estate conference, you'd learn so much. You'd be there for that idea start. You'd be there for that like, opportunity. But more importantly, the cross-pollination across all these different industries is really helpful. We as not just a UX group, but as a technology UX group, live in a bubble where we think technology solves a lot of problems. And we are trying to solve those problems from scratch very often. But if you go to other industries that have been around for a long time, you'll find out that, say, for the automotive industry is a good example of this. They've been around for over 100 years. They've solved a lot of these production problems. They've solved a lot of these like issues around. I mean, where does lean come from? It didn't come from technology, you know,
Yeah.
just manufacturing.
Toyota production
A lot
system.
of these ideas that we think are new and interesting are not new and interesting. They've been around for a very, very, very long time. And if we take the trouble to get outside our time, our comfort zones, go to other countries, go to other conferences, it exposes us to some really, really cool, interesting stuff. And so I encourage people not just to go, I know it's harder to sell to your boss that you're going to some weird conference, but there are a lot of cool, interesting, cross functional places to go and learn about how other industries and other domains are solving problems. And then we can come back smarter and more interesting. Because my biggest fear is that we send folks off to these conferences and these events, and what they come back with is a bunch of Instagram pictures and a hangover. They don't really learn anything. They're not there to learn. They haven't really been exposed to anything new. It's just the same people. And I know I'm one of them. I've spoken at all the conferences and I get invited back every year. I'm like, why? Why are you inviting, first of all, why are you inviting an old white guy who's been in the industry for this long to this conference? Where are the new, interesting people? Where are the people from outside of the industry? Why are we not doing more of that? And that's always the question that we should be asking is, why are we listening to the same people? Just because I've written books and had the experience, I shouldn't be the only, person on stage or one of the same. They will look the same. You look around and it will look similar. So, yeah, again, a bit of a rant.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's also, it seems to be this tendency where a lot of the presentations trend toward the introductory, towards the 101 level, as opposed to the more advanced or nuanced presentation, which might be more narrow, but might change how people think. But it's also harder content to create.
Yeah, I mean, there was a period of time when conferences were actually looking at your presentations before you even went there and then like telling you whether you should add or subtract or, yeah, as you say, well, it's not going to appeal to everybody. Can you make it appeal to everybody? Fortunately, they don't do that very much at all. But I think we're biased anyway. We come along and we say, well, who's going to be there? Who's going to be in the audience? And then you kind of think and say the things that are appropriate for that audience. I would love, when I would to conferences, I would get up and be deliberately divisive. I would be like, half you are going to love this, and the other half are going to go, who the hell is this guy? Like, I wanted to do that because I wanted to create that sense of like, you either like got it and you're like part of that hard conversation, or you're like, I think I missed out on something, or maybe this was the wrong conference for me. Like, there should be a little bit of divisiveness. The anecdote that I always remind people of is when JFK said we were going to the moon in '62. We have this kind of romantic idea that the whole of America was like, we're going to the moon. What a great idea. What a brilliant man. What a fantastic opportunity. I can guarantee you, probably more than half of America thought it was a stupid idea. Maybe even 2/3 of America probably thought that he was a complete idiot. Like, why are we going to the moon? Why are we spending this money? Don't we have other problems? Like, you know, there were really good reasons not to be excited about that. We can look back in hindsight and think like, yeah, that was a romantic moment for American history. But the reality is, you don't make history by getting up and telling people what they've heard already. You make history by opening your mouth and expressing new ideas, exciting ideas, divisive ideas, change-making ideas. And that's what I think we should be looking for in our education, in our conferences, in the way that we go and explore the world is go outside of your comfort zone, go places where you don't agree with people, where it's scary, and hear what they have to say, because that's where UX is going to learn from this, cross-functional or outside influence way of seeing the world. We're going to have a much more, we're going to have a better education. We just have a better experience, and ultimately, that's what we're trying to do in our work.
All right, last question, because I don't think I can just leave this one after that. Is there an idea that's out there right now, divisive or otherwise, that kind of excites you for its potential to impact, what we're doing?
I come back to my days in biology. I still don't think we quite understand how important our biology is. Like,
Mhm.
most people think they're making choices, like cognitive choices about their life. But what's happening is your brain is justifying what your DNA wants.
And your
So,
chemistry and the chemicals going on in your brain and everything
oh
else.
yeah,
Yeah, we're good at
yeah.
justifying
I
and telling
mean,
stories.
so much. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, I remember an evolution biologist was telling me, it was like, so much of what we do every day is just around this idea of like that, partners having sex so that DNA can get into the next generation, because that's ultimately that measure of fitness, right? Darwin was talking about fitness. He wasn't talking about like running around. He was talking about, can you get your DNA into the next generation? And so much of what we do is orchestrated around those ideas. And yet we are very happy to believe otherwise. We're very happy to believe that, we're writing creative poetry or making beautiful movies for some other reason. But kind of at the bottom of it is this idea that we're biological, and we're not that far from, you know, where we were 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago. And I think that UX needs to explore this more. I've spoken about this a few times, and I've written a couple of articles on this. But if you think about what technology does, it's really like taking what power we have and accelerating or amplifying it. A good example of this is um, the idea that we're on a conference call right now, right? So we are not doing, what we've evolved is eyes and ears and senses so that we can communicate with each other. What technology has allowed us to do is turn that into a superpower.
Right.
I am Superman. You are Superman. You can see through walls right now. You are literally seeing across the city to another location, just like Superman does. And I think that if we spent a little bit of time thinking about what are the current powers that we have, that we've evolved to have as biological beings, and what is the amplification of that look like, I think we'll get a little bit closer to what the actual user experience needs to be, instead of trying to come up with a new fandangled like innovation that's going to leapfrog that. All the things that have been successful in the past few decades have been amplifications of things that we want to do already. Social media, the fact that I can put a Ring product on my front door and somebody can ring that, and I can be in another state and it'll tell me that somebody's at my door. Those are really just amplifications of the things that I'm trying to do anyway as a human being. All of the dating apps, all of the social media stuff, all of that stuff is really just a context-specific biological amplification. And so this is the idea that I would like to see more UX and design people think about: is what are we already doing? How is it already working? And how can we amplify that in a healthy way, versus trying to come up with some innovation that's going to fall flat anyway because it's not in line with what DNA wants from us.
Well, I think that's a great concept to get people thinking, and maybe we'll end on that. If people want to hear more from you, you mentioned you write on Medium. What other channels? Where should the people look for you?
I've been very quiet on Twitter, although I do have an account there. And my art is on Instagram, so I tend to be on Instagram as well. So you can find me there. And from time to time, I'll have a conversation on LinkedIn. If it's work related, I tend to keep it on LinkedIn right now. Like I said, I'm doing advisory work for the moment and focusing on my art. But who knows where I'll be in a few months or a few years from now. So I like having conversations. I like talking to people about these things. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. We'll get the links to all those places, as well as to lots of the other stuff we talked about. That'll all be in the show notes. That'll be on the site at sux.live. That's SUX for savingux.live. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any other episodes, and go to the site to check out any past interviews. Some great nuggets in each one. So once again, Richard, thank you so much for sharing all your insights with our community. And until next time, I'm Jeremy Kriegel. Thanks for listening.